So, hello again. Here we are. Here is Ali. He's got lots more widgety goodness for you today, haven't you, Ali?
I do.
Yes. So I'll just give everybody a moment or two to rejoin. I see we're on 49 live. So just wait a moment. Let's wait for people to wave at us in the chat and confirm that they can see and hear us. I'm sure they can. They're just typing. We're typing now.
I wonder if I should turn these lights on. Am I a bit dark?
No, you're all right.
Well,
if you saw a blank screen there, people, that was because Ali actually just moved. So.
it's got one side of my face now.
Mikey's saying live stream offline. Why is he saying that we're not offline? I'm going to wait. Brian is also saying live stream offline. Okay. I'm going to wait a moment. I'm going to wait until we see if we can. See if we're getting any confirmation there. Because people are joining. There are 50 people joining. Brian says not yet, nothing. Okay. The video is still. Oh, Mark says I'm back. Hold on. Yes, we're live. Are we live? Yes. Excellent. I think we just had a wee bit of a lag there. Okay, good. All right. In that case, I will begin again and inform you all that Ali is here and he's going to bring you lots more widgety goodness. So here we go. Over to you, Ali.
All right. Thanks. Oh, I've got okay. Can everyone still hear me? All right.
Yep.
So, is the echo gone now? Great. Okay. As usual, I'll just dive straight into my slides and give you a quick intro of what I'm going to talk about. That recursion there, find a good way of avoiding that. So this month I'm going to talk about initially an iOS native field, so sort of pretty bleeding edge stuff, and then I'm going to go back and talk about child widgets. I'm not sure that much has been said about these before. The concept has been around for a long time, but there's a good reason for talking about them now, because those two pieces are going to fit together to create the third section of this talk, which is about cross-platform native widgets. So the iOS native single line field, it's exactly the same pretty much as the native control created with mobile control create. Unlike on Android, iOS separates these out. So you have one object type, which is a single line field, and one's a multi-line field. On Android, you set the multi-line property. So again, as with the Android field, creating the iOS field is just largely an exercise in taking the Objective-C and C++ code and just translating it over to LCB. So here's a sort of sample of some of the code that you would find in the input control section of the engine. It's not especially readable. And here is the translation to LTB. So we've replaced the sort of the enum there with just an array constant, and the only sort of, I guess, tricky thing there is just defining the foreign handler and its binding. I'll show you, whoops, sorry. So here in this line of the code, you can see the exact selector that's being used to set the auto capitalization type, and so that tells us what we need here as the selector to use in the foreign binding. Oops. This, again, like with Android, we need to do all this stuff on the UI thread. One slightly annoying thing here is this selector is actually defined in the UI text input traits protocol. And so we have to put that in here instead of UI text field. But again, this is something that you'll find these things in the API, but where they're actually implemented. So that's a slight annoyance there. Okay. So there's various similar things here: autocorrection type, manage return key, keyboard type. So all of these are just, here's the actual code for the iOS native field. I've got the actual doc for it for each property here. Lots of these ones, the keyword type and stuff like that, they're enum properties, and we just have a list of their options. So it does seem like quite a long file, but it's also got a lot in it. Just to give you a little bit of a comparison here, this is the auto capitalization type LCB code for Android, which, because it has quite a different sort of API for, like, all of its input type stuff is one method call, the set input type, but you just have to pass it the appropriate integer, which has various sort of flags, and you have to build it up using the bitwise operations. So that's why that's a lot more complicated than Android. for messages, we've got an iOS input delegate, which handles the did begin editing, did end editing, and did change notifications. I've sort of given you a bit of the flavor of the implementation there. There's another 100 lines of implementation there for handling messages in that input field. And quite nicely, it's quite a lot easier. I've missed out a comment character here. This is just as a note. So you can find on the API what actual values some of these things have. So this control event is 1 shifted left by 17. So we define the handler we want for the callback. It's got a one Objective-C object argument and one optional any context. So all of the action callbacks have that same signature in Objective-C. And yeah, so you'll get used to this kind of pattern. It's in the iOS button and the Mac button and Mac field as well. Just adding an action for a particular control event. So even though it's probably the most complicated part of the widget, it's I think quite a lot more simple than the engine code that it replaces. Okay, I don't think I'm not gonna do a demo of that because I might do a demo that includes it later. Where is my browser window? Does anyone have any questions about the iOS native field? If I could put this.
I'm not seeing any questions there at the moment, Ali. No, I think you're good.
Okay, great. I'm going to keep the little chat window up there to the side so I can see it if I need to. Okay, let's move on to child widgets. And as I say, this has been around for ages in the LCB API, the syntax for LCB, but I don't. It's not used very much. It's not used in any of the widgets that we bundle with LiveCode. I'm not aware of any other uses of it, but it's pretty good. So it lets you encapsulate multiple widgets so that they appear as a single widget to the app user. You could say it's a bit like groups, I suppose, but more encapsulated. So you create a child widget using a new widget syntax. The properties can be set using set property, prop name of widget. Messages posted from those widgets are handled by the parent widget, and they can be distinguished using annotations. So here's how you would create, for example, a selector widget and a clock widget and put them into variables. Now, they don't actually, they're kind of abstract widget objects at that point until they're actually placed. And then placing it causes it to occupy, I say physical space, obviously, not actually physical space, screen space. I don't know what the right way to say that is. But they become a layer of the parent widget. So once it's placed, you can set the rectangle property of the child widget, and that's where it will appear. And the on paint handler of the child widget will get called at the end of the on paint handler of the parent. So, oops. Cool. So typically this will be done in the onGeometryChange handler. And this just, so this example, we put the selector at the top and put the clock underneath it. The rectangle is a sort of special case that it's a built-in property of the widget. So defined properties you can also set using this generic property syntax. So there's an example of getting the time zone property of the clock and incrementing it by 1. And as I said, messages posted from the child widget are handled in the parent. So if you post my message, that gets turned into, well, not turned into, it can be handled by a handler called on, and then the name of the message in the parent widget. So on my message will handle the my message that's posted from the child. And mouse events are at the moment automatically posted to the parent. Excuse me. Now, when events are posted from the child, you need a way to distinguish which child triggered it. You might have a widget with 100 clocks, and clicking on one of them increments its hour hand by 1 or something like that. So you would just iterate through setting something like an index annotation on each one of them. In this case, or this example, it's just setting the name of the selector to selector and the name of the clock to clock. And then when we handle a message, we can use the target to obtain an instance of a widget object. And then we can retrieve the annotation to figure out which thing triggered the event. So in this example, on mouse enter, we just get the name annotation that we assign. You could do exactly this to figure out which of the clocks was clicked. When a child widget isn't needed anymore, you can unplace it. So it's just the opposite of placing, and they will no longer be drawn.
Ali, we seem to have lost your screen at the moment.
Oh.
Do you want to try re-sharing it, perhaps?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Is that better?
Yep, you're back. You're back. That's good.
I'm not sure what happened there. Can you hear me still?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes. Well, I can hear you.
Sean Carl says it seems very complicated. Yeah, it is a little bit complicated at the moment. There's a lot of stuff for the iOS native stuff. There are a lot of docs out there already for Android, but not necessarily for iOS. So I think the iOS field, once I get it ready to submit a pull request, will probably be a blog post or something like that. But it'd be good to do some more interesting examples for iOS as well. We've already got the background audio in the audio recording for Android, so maybe something similar on iOS would be quite good. Sean's asking again, not again, a different question. If a child has an annotation, can you send a message to that child using that annotation to define which is to receive the message? At the moment, you can't actually post down. So the only way a parent widget can interact with the child is to set properties on it. You can't sort of call any handler in that widget. We have plans to implement something like that. There's a lot of sort of useful things that you probably want to do. And it's kind of like associating some sort of command syntax with functionality inside a widget. So that will come at some point. I think one of the main hurdles there is that we've got the do in browser sort of syntax, and that could do with being done in this way instead of using the do command. But essentially, which child it was that whatever via the annotation, and then do something, trigger some sort of handler within it. So as I was saying in sort of at the beginning, that this sort of remains underused in general. There are only a few examples in the wild. So these slides are based on a simple composed widget that is in GitHub. I've also included it in the resources folder next to these slides. And you can find a more complex example in my GitHub repo. This is something I was doing for the tutorials, creating a sort of tutorial chooser with a title and a progress bar that said how far through you'd got. And this button here is a widget. This progress bar is a widget, and then each line of this list is a widget which has the progress bar and some text fields in that as a child, and then the whole widget itself is a widget with multiple of these lines as children. It's quite a nice way to do a sort of list type thing. This has 1,000 lines, and it scrolls really quite nicely. I guess I can't show you the scrolling because it's just a picture, but yeah, that's a good example of the kind of thing you can do. Any other questions on child widgets and composed widgets? Okay, so a question from last week was we'll be able to drag a single object which appears as a native field on all platforms. And I've managed to figure out a little demo of this by putting the native field widgets and the notion of child objects or composed widgets together. So in my resources, there's a demo widget which is a native single line field on Mac, iOS, and Android. So it's halfway there. There are some choices that we have to make about how we're going to do this. Child widgets is only one sort of possible way. But the reason that I chose to do it that way just now is that I think the composed widget thing is interesting and useful, and maybe not too many people know about it. This is doable now without any engine changes, at least for a demo. And it doesn't require many code changes in the native field widgets themselves. Unfortunately, it does require some code changes in the native widgets themselves. So one issue is that you can't set the native layer of a child widget. All of these native widgets essentially obtain a pointer to the native concept of a view on that platform. And then there's a syntax, set my native layer to, and then that pointer. But you can't do that if it's a child widget. So there's possible ways we can make it so that you can do that for a child widget. But to avoid making any engine changes at this point, I've worked around it by just exposing that native layer pointer as a property of each of the native fields. So just defined a property called native view, which its accessor is that view pointer. Another thing to work around here is that the native fields still need to work as standalone widgets, as well as when they're acting as the child widget for the cross-platform field. So another little workaround here is just adding an isChild property, which can be set to true by the parent. So here's how that works. Similar property definition, and then if it's not a child widget, then it sets its native layer. But if it is, then it just puts it into the mViewPointer variable, which can then be accessed via the native view property by the parent. So now all the parent widget needs to do is create the appropriate widget for the platform, and on create, place the child widget, fetch the native layer of the child and set its own native layer to that pointer, unplace and set the native layer to nothing and unclose, and just expose whatever properties and messages that are coming from the child widget. Here's the onCreate handler. So there are the three native widget kinds, and it just switches on the operating system and puts the appropriate widget kind into the mnative field variable. Because the Android field can be multi-line, we just make sure to set the multi-line property of it to false. And then make sure we set the isChild, the new isChild property of whichever one it is, to true. So because the isChild property is true of the mnative field, we can get its native view property, which is a pointer to the native layer, and set the native layer. Now, obviously, one property that is shared by all native fields is the text property. So here's how that would look. You get the text if we have a native field around, then we can actually use the property syntax to get its text. And similarly for setting. And then, for example, return key message, we just handle on return key and post return key. So we just pass that message up to script. Okay, I'm going to have a look at questions and then I'll go back to my slides. Herman, is it possible to have the browser widget as a child? Not really, no. I mean, it also sets its native layer. So, yeah, at the moment, it's not possible to do that. One thing, I mean, there are ways you could sort of do it. You could create a widget which has multiple views. So you'd have to sort of hook into the generic UI view, for example, on iOS, and then set one of those views to display the browser widget. But then the rest of the stuff, you wouldn't be able to do sort of native LCB, or you wouldn't be able to do non-native LCB stuff in the extra space. It would all be a view. So I'm not sure there's a very good way to do that at the moment. Jonathan says, can we just make a bunch of widgets without children and group them into an LC group? Then we could layer them with using the relayer group controls property. Yes, you could do that. The advantage of doing it as composed widgets is that there's no way for the user to ungroup those controls, or it really does act as one control from the point of view of the end user. I don't know. I suppose conceptually there's that difference, but maybe it doesn't make too much difference from when you get down to the app in the end. But I don't know. It is an option. I think it does make sense in some circumstances. Dave says, any thoughts on handling external keyboards when using a mobile device? I'm sure there's almost certainly just some kind of message, input event message that needs to be handled for that. On Android, I suspect it's possible now. For iOS and Mac, I think we need a more generic delegate sort of system, because at the moment it's a bit restricted with kind of an action target model. I think Mark has already pretty much done the work for the delegate version, so that will be coming, but I can't imagine it'll be very hard to do once that's in. Okay, I'll just go through a little bit of the likely future plans here. So something I've sort of been thinking about a lot now when I was trying to figure out how to do a cross-platform widget. The issue is that these native fields are actually pretty distinct. Like the mobile control API that we have does a pretty good job of making them seem like they have the same properties and stuff like that. But there are a bunch of properties that have the same name, but they're not quite the same. Messages are shoehorned into the same sort of form. And we're kind of generally reluctant to add properties that aren't relevant to all platforms. So it's highly likely in the future that our native widgets will be much more closely aligned with the platform API and nomenclature. This has a few advantages, which is more features. There's no reason not to add every single native feature to each widget. If you're already familiar with the native API, then they're much easier to use, and we can also automatically wrap the APIs more easily. For example, things like the Android field has a focus change callback, which we use to synthesize the open field, exit field, and close field messages. An iOS field has editing did begin and editing did end. So it should probably be the responsibility of the cross-platform level widget to handle these messages and convert them to the appropriate cross-platform message, but leave the native widget just sending the native sounding messages. I think that's probably, it's not decided yet, but I think that's probably the best way forward. Okay, I've got a slide here, just the collective breath holding.
I'm crossing my fingers for you, Ali. I'm sure this one will work.
Previous examples haven't. It's been about 50-50, hasn't it? So here is the cross-platform field. I've already set up everything with the stack to get it to work. So, right, let's click test here. Oh. Honestly, that worked about 5 times earlier. It's extremely disappointing. Right, let's I can't believe that's happened. I was so confident. Okay, let's try resetting the content settings. So that's how confident I was. But then also, because I know that these things happen, I also had a slide where it's crossed out. So let's keep the crossed out hooray slide for now. Okay, that's probably going to take absolutely ages to do. My final slide again is, if you've got any more questions, please email support@livecode.com with the subject widget queries, in case there's anything you want me to talk about next time. Looks like that's going to take forever. So, oh, okay, let's give it one last go. Right, never do demos.
It just doesn't want to play, Ali. It just doesn't want to play.
Anyway, I promise you that was working.
I'm sure it was. Can
probably, you can try it out, prove whether it was or not. The code is all there in the resources next to the slides.
You can build us a little video, Ali, showing that thing working, and I can share it with all the materials. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, does anyone have any further questions? Oh, that's probably good because my voice seems to be kind of cracking up. So,
okay. Well, that's very good. It looks like we're all finishing in good time today, which is a nice treat, and gives everybody time to breathe and refresh their tea or whatever it is they need to do between sessions. So I will close this one off. If we're definitely not having any more questions for Ali, do send him more things to show you next time, because he loves doing it. All right. Okay. So
bye.
Everybody come back in 10 minutes and we'll be kicking off with Kevin's monthly report. Bye for now.